So today, Dad, do you know what we're going to talk about? Dad's and I's chickpeas. Mummy and Lucinda are dust out away, and these are chickpeas.
Welcome to this, the December update for the Year in Our Garden series. Each month we've been taking a look at how our Tasmanian garden is growing. Now, sometimes when you put plants in, it's really interesting to see how they tell you about the soil and inform you about the quality of the soil. And that's really the situation here in this patch of chickpeas. Now, as I've said before, this is the first time I've grown chickpeas, but what I really wanted to draw your attention to was how, while all the chickpeas are now flowering and going reasonably well,
Yeah, they sure are.
there's some that are doing much better than others.
Like these guys.
Yes, these ones actually have little pods on them already, and they're much taller and greener than a lot of the others are.
Yeah,
Now,
they're big.
The obvious reason is
Yeah.
that this soil down here, one, it has more organic matter in it, and two,
Welcome.
we also had a fire back here. If you remember, we had a stump that we burnt out, and some of the ash from that would have spread around when I rotary hoed it. But I think the big reason is the extra organic matter that's in this soil that was around the base of the tree, where the bark has fallen off the tree over many years, probably 100, 200 years this tree was growing.
And that log me cooked some yummy roasted potatoes.
We did, Samuel. That has gone into the soil and improved this soil, whereas in the higher areas here, where it is still pretty much just clay, the chickpeas are way behind and not doing so well. But overall, it's looking like a good success. But it really shows you how much putting organic matter into the soil, how much difference that will actually make. It has been very dry here this December, whereas back in November we had rain and cool. Summer has arrived in December and it's really started to heat up. Yesterday reached the hottest I think we've had, which was 30 degrees. Now I know that most people on the mainland are going to laugh at that because they're getting temperatures at the moment in the mid-40s. But 30 degrees is fairly warm for us, not exceptional, but fairly warm. And
yeah, it sure is.
It means that being dry, watering is now the dominant job in the garden. You'll see the hose here in the chickpeas. I have watered them just once a few days ago because there has been no rain for probably 3 weeks and it doesn't look like there's going to be much rain for quite a while. So I thought at this stage, when they're just flowering and developing their pods, extra soil moisture would really be of an advantage. So here is the summer potato crop, and as you see, it's really developed since last month. It's really increased in height and achieved pretty much full cover. There's a couple of weeds around that I need to come through and pull out.
Even flowers that belong on there.
Yes, it's starting to get 1 or 2 flowers on the potatoes. What I have done to it is that I did hill it again, and I also, because when I actually planted it, I didn't actually get compost into the soil with this lot of potatoes. In between each row, I've actually added some green waste compost, commercial compost, up in between each row. So it was the 2 runs of compost to enrich the soil and to help keep the moisture in. So hopefully that will give them a good boost along. What are you doing, Samuel?
This is our yummy berry patch. This is what the cherries need to look like to eat. Has 1 sweet berry.
One thing that Samuel is really excited about this time of the year is the fact that the cherries are beginning to ripen. Now, we don't have a lot of cherries, just these 2 trees. Maybe we should plant some more because Samuel really does enjoy them, and we all do. But Samuel, of course, is a bit anxious to eat them, and realistically, even these cherries, when they start to look dark, I find they can actually stay on the tree even another whole week. Samuel, thank you. They can stay on the tree another whole week and get sweeter. So my advice really is don't rush to pick your cherries, particularly when you've got a net on like this and you're not competing with the birds. But giving them that little bit extra time and you'll have sweeter cherries and something that makes the shop ones like, ugh, these are just so much better. As I said earlier, because it's dry, one of the dominant jobs at the moment is watering. The way we water most of our garden is to use a single butterfly sprinkler. We do this because we are in a fortunate situation of having a gravity feed water. The pressure will run one of these quite nicely, as you see. It won't run more than one, but you can run this pretty continuously because it's gravity feed. But there are other areas where you have to use some other forms of watering. As I've mentioned in other months, with the tomatoes I use a weeper hose that's actually right there with the tomatoes under the compost and gets the water right to the roots without getting it on the leaves. But for most of the flower garden, which needs lots of water to keep flowering like it is at the moment, this butterfly sprinkler does the job, and we just keep it rotating, keep it moving. It's a continual demand on your time and your mental processes over this time of the year, because every couple of hours you've got to think, I need to go and move the sprinkler to somewhere new. And that way you're maximising the water across the whole garden. Of course, this is one of the reasons why when you buy land, you really need to choose land that has plenty of water available, has running water, and then you can actually use it to grow a garden like this.
So these are what are they called again, Dad?
Don't you love these things?
Yes, but what are they called? Passion fruit. These are passion fruit. They have also green leaves, and have you heard what is funny? Is that the fruit are green too.
Yes, at the moment they're green, but when they're ripe, what colour are they, Samuel?
Darker.
Yes.
Darker
lovely
green.
Black passion fruit.
Yes.
Now,
and they're going to eat them when they're very ripe.
Yes. I wanted you to see this black passion fruit
Yes.
vine. This is the only one we have growing.
Yeah.
And as you see, I'm growing it against my shed here. It is facing the east where the sun comes on it in the morning. The interesting thing about this, and you'll see it's going quite nicely this time of the year.
Is, John.
It's coming into flower, it's beginning to set fruit, is that while, like normally against a building, it's a rain shadow, and this is really the case here. The most of the rain would come from the west here, the wind would be pushing it, so it doesn't get a huge amount of direct water on its roots. And I don't water it. I don't water this passion fruit ever. Now that's pretty exceptional that it's growing like this despite the fact that it doesn't get watered in summer, because the Tasmanian summer is dry. What makes the difference? It used to struggle, but the big difference was when I began to putting compost on it on the ground, and I put about a wheelbarrow full of compost around this every year, and that extra organic matter in the soil keeps the moisture in and gives it the strength it needs to grow good deep roots and accommodate this dry time and to keep on producing despite the fact that it's not getting any water. Now, in terms of growing black passion fruit in Tasmania, they are frost sensitive if you're getting direct frost on them, but if you can grow them in a situation like this where they're going to be somewhat sheltered, this is sheltered by the building and sheltered from the winds so that it keeps warmer, you're going to be able to do it quite successfully. So have a go. If you're in Tasmania or a cooler climate, have a go with the black passion fruit. So here in the veggie patch, what's actually happened and what's producing? Well, everything is growing really well, as you'd expect this time of the year. The various stages around here under the netting, the lettuce is about to come to seed, and to allow that to happen, because of the nets, I'm going to need to take the net off. The broccoli is probably almost finished. It didn't do that well, that lot of broccoli. So I'll probably have to take that broccoli out so that it's not feeding the white cabbage butterfly, which is now around.
Yep,
and
then lovely, beautiful one.
The lettuce will be able to give me some seed so that I can keep it going for the next season. The silver beet is now harvesting really well. The spinach is really finished picking because it is now going to seed. I'll probably pull most of that out and put a second crop in the next month. Some of it I may let go to see if I can get some seed off it. The carrots here are almost at a stage that you can start picking them. We haven't pulled any yet, but it's not far off, so that's really good news. Behind me here you'll see the snow peas. Now we have been picking lots of those, and Samuel enjoys eating them raw, don't you, Samuel?
Yeah.
But they are starting to slow down, though they will.
Very big one.
Shortly after this first crop, they will come with subsequent smaller crops, because the young shoots here will start to put out some new flowers, and you'll get more as they go on. So because the first crop's finished, don't give up on them. Give them more water and let them come on a bit further.
Yep.
Zucchinis we are picking, and I want to show you something particular with those zucchinis. So with these zucchinis, not only do I need to come and do some weeding here, but there's something particular I wanted you to notice. And that's the fact that while there's lots of flowers and zucchinis coming, there is an absolute dearth of male flowers. There's virtually, I think I've only seen one male flower on here so far. It's just totally dominated by female flowers. Now these are hybrid zucchinis, and they've bred them to maximize production. But what it means is that you're producing lots and lots of zucchinis this size,
ripe, John?
but they won't, because they're not fertilized, they won't blow out and turn into larger zucchinis.
They're meant to be much more bigger than that.
Yes, we tend to like the larger zucchinis. So really it's an excess of female flowers over male flowers that's going on here.
This is a beady one.
My thoughts on this really are that I usually prefer to grow a non-hybrid variety, and that way I can keep my own seed from it. This year I cut corners and just went and bought some plants, and it really wasn't a good idea. Next year I really need to make sure that I get non-hybrid zucchinis in here again. The only thing is the hybrid ones generally have a higher resistance to downy mildew, which is a good thing. The other option would be to grow one non-hybrid and the other's hybrid, and that way you'd get the male flowers from the non-hybrid one, which would then fertilize the others and actually give you a better size production. Down here in this corner it's a bit of a jungle, and I also need to put some attention in here and do some weeding. I've got parsnips growing up, but there's some weeds amongst them that need to come out, and a few other things. Now I wanted to show you these tomatoes here. These are really a personal experiment. My traditional habit is been to buy tomato plants and pop them on, and I've done that most years, and including this year, to put them out to try and get early growth. But this year is an experiment. At the same time as I bought those tomato plants, I bought some tomato seed, and while I potted those tomato plants on, I actually put the seed directly into this soil outdoors, and this is the result. So if you're looking at these, you'll see that they are growing quite tall. Amongst them they have flowers coming. The variety is Rouge de Marmande, and I can't see any, oh yes, no, I don't really see any tomatoes set yet, but there's certainly plenty of flowers there, plenty of growth and height. Let's go and compare those to the tomatoes that I potted and planted out. So these are the tomatoes that I grew from the seedlings. And as you see, they're not as high as the ones that came from a seed. The ones that came from a seed are probably up to this high. But because these are single plants with more space, they've actually spread out wider. So I don't know that that's a big difference. Stage wise, these are flowering, as are the others. Realistically, they're looking, you might say, at about the same stage of advancement at this point. What I'm interested in to see is which of those is actually going to produce fruit first.
Well,
will it be these, or will it be the ones that came from a seed? The ones that came from a seed, of course, didn't emerge from the ground for around about 3 weeks after I planted them. So these had like a head start in growth. They were probably this high at the time when the others just emerged from the ground. But not being transplanted seems to have made a big difference, that they've actually caught up really well. So I'm just interested for myself to see whether I really need to do the seedling process, the work of transplanting, or whether it is better to actually just go and put the seed directly into the ground and let nature be in control and decide when they should come up and the speed at which they grow. So I'll repeat this perhaps next year, where I put them side by side rather than in a separate position, and see, because it'd be nice to see them side by side and see which ones actually are the winners. So here in the pumpkin patch, they're doing really well. They're at the point where they're about to start to run.
Yep.
And that means you'll see there's quite a bit of weak germination that is going on in terms of coming out of this straw, and I need to really go and pull some of that out before they really run and spread across. But I think they all do very well. Yep. And really nicely. The corn also is really getting underway now. In the last couple of weeks, with the heat that we've had, it's really started to jump out of the ground, so that's great. We're looking forward to a good crop there. So here in the greenhouse, things are growing really well. The straw bale tomatoes are turning into an absolute jungle. They are starting to develop some young fruit, so that's really good. The capsicums here beside me have got lots of fruit coming, and the eggplants are actually beginning to flower, so that's all really happy with this heat, because it's really hot in here now. These cucumbers are really starting to get underway. They took a while. I think it was still a little bit cool earlier when I planted them, but now with the heat in here, they're really starting to get going, and there's lots of flowers, even 1 or 2 fruit coming. They develop really quickly, so it won't be very long before we have our own cucumbers, and they're looking really happy, so that's great. I've put some irrigation on these, some sprinklers, which sprays the leaves of these cucumbers. Cucumbers don't mind water on their leaves. So the irrigation, the water in the greenhouse here, I have the selective system which I built previously, where I can plug what beds I want to water at any time in, and just let it spray, and it's keeping it watered really well. Now earlier in the month we were away for a number of days, and with the heat it's really important to keep water, especially on pots. So here in Elizabeth's potting area, I put a automatic watering system in, so that it's on a timer and it runs automatically every couple of days. It gives a good sprinkle before the heat of the sun comes out. So it's a really good place. I've been raising some seeds here. My nephew gave me some perennial kale, and I put those seed in, and they've jumped up really well. There's also some spring onions and some lettuce that haven't come up yet, so that's been watered just by the automatic watering system. If anyone wants to have a go at seedlings that hasn't before, kale, in fact all the brassicas, but especially kale, are one of the easiest things to grow. You put them in, and I think these were out of the ground in about 2 days, so they're really fast and give you a quick result that's satisfying and knows that you've actually got a seed coming up. So they will go out next month. Once they've developed higher, they will go out into the garden, probably by the end of January somewhere. They'll be outside. The broad beans are now in full harvest, and we're picking regularly, lots and lots of broad beans. I will need in the next few days to pick a lot of these and put them in the freezer we tend to freeze some broad beans for short-term use over a few months, and the rest then that don't get picked in the time that they're ready can just go to dry beans that'd be available for seed, for green manure, or for grinding, for flour, whatever we actually choose to do with them. But yeah, really good harvest coming there. The cabbages are also picking now. One of the problems of buying commercial plants in a punnet is that you get a lot in one go, and that means with these cabbages I really need to, one, give some away, two, actually look at making perhaps some sauerkraut or something like that to use them quite quickly. These elephant garlic are ready to come out. Basically the point where I dig these is generally within the last week of December, first week of January, somewhere in that period. So in the next couple of days I will dig these out, and this crop section then can be cleaned up of weeds and prepared for the next crop that will come in here, which will be a autumn crop of potatoes. But we've already taken out earlier last month the proper garlic. It needs to come out earlier. This stuff can wait about at least a month after you take out your proper garlic. That's my experience anyway. But there should be enough here to give us a really good crop for the year and enough to replant, because you use a fair bit for replanting. Probably around about 20% of the crop needs to be dedicated to replant. So 80% to eat, 20% for planting. And last, but certainly not least, we have the Sylvan Berries are now coming into full production. These give us a lot of really beautiful fresh fruit over summer. We pick usually around about a kilo per day, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the stage of the season. But they will produce now for anything up to the next 6 weeks. And well, this year they've been a little bit later coming in. They are really still doing well. So to recap, what actually are we getting from the garden to eat at the moment? Well, there's quite a bit. We have the berries. The strawberries are coming towards the end. They're slowing up, but we're still getting some strawberries. We have cherries, the cherries coming. So there's 3 different fruits. We also have in citrus still lemons and grapefruit picking. In the veggie garden, of course, there is the broad beans, cabbages, there's garlic already in the kitchen being utilised from the earlier proper garlic. There's potatoes that we've been picking from our own garden. We've got plenty of potatoes. We'll have potatoes now continuously as the successive crops come in. And we've got the silver beet. We're still getting a little bit of lettuce even though it's heading to seed. We've got the zucchinis, we have snow peas. There's probably a few other things that I'm forgetting, but overall the garden is really making probably the major contribution now to what we're eating. Bearing in mind we still have bottled apples and plums from last season that we're still consuming. So what we actually need to buy in terms of food is fairly small, especially fresh food. It's only small amounts, and some of it is things like mangoes that you simply cannot grow here, and you could do without eating them, of course, but this time of the year you like to enjoy some of those flavours that are exotic, and simply because you can. So that's December. Look, it might be the end of the year technically for most people, but here in Tasmania as a gardener, for me it is the middle of the year. That's why I started this series in July. Everything's coming into production, and the end of the year really will come when winter comes, which is still a long way off. So there's still a lot of jobs to be done, but more and more they move from planting and nurturing to harvest jobs. So we'll come back at the end of January and see what else is picking.